Are your Fashion Week photos not looking like the pros? I'm diving into the top 8 reasons why your runway shots are missing the mark. And be sure to stick around till the end for a bonus tip that I recently discovered that'll have your Fashion Week photos look like they belong on the cover of Vogue Runway. Just to show you that I know what I'm talking about, here's some of my work from previous shows at New York Fashion Week, Miami Swim Week, LA Fashion Week, all the different fashion weeks. I've shot hundreds of fashion shows on every type of runway imaginable. Perfect lighting, clean, crisp runways with beautiful designer clothing, top-notch agency supermodels where it would be tough to make a bad picture. I've also shot in some of the worst runway conditions possible. Poor lighting, off-colored bulbs, runways filled with smoke, lights shining directly into my camera, first-time models in basements, alleyways, in the rain, 100-degree humid Miami heat that fogs up your lens, all the way to the complete opposite of a rooftop in New York City in the middle of a snowstorm in February. You name it, I've been there, and I've still gotten the shot. By shooting in all these unideal conditions, I have been able to adapt on the fly and know that whatever situation I'm walking into, I will be ready for it. And the only way I know what not to do is because I have made every single one of these mistakes in the past. Well, all but one. Because number 3 is a cardinal sin that thankfully I have always avoided. One last note before I get into the list is why you still need to be able to get the shot even if the conditions aren't great. It's because the clients don't care. The model, the designer, the show producer may not understand why your photos look so bad. They hired you to get a great picture. So even if the conditions aren't ideal, you still need to be able to produce that great photo. All right, let's dive right into the list. The first mistake that I see photographers make on the runway is shooting in auto white balance, or not correctly editing the white balance in post. It really just breaks my heart to see the shows, designers, photographers, or models share pictures with a purple tint cast over the entire photo. This is a fashion show. The whole purpose of the show is to show off a piece of clothing. A huge part of the design is the color of the fabric that the designer uses. They will spend weeks picking out the exact shade of color that they want to design their outfit with. They don't say, oh yeah, let's just choose cream and blue. Just grab me those 2 colors and we'll be good to go. No, definitely not. They're very specific with each shade of color for every single detail of the outfit. They need all the different pieces to match, not only with what the model is wearing, but with the collection as a whole. So if you're sending out photos where the white is slightly off colored, that can ruin the entire outfit. It honestly makes me a bit nauseous. There's just something a bit unsettling when a true white isn't white. And for someone like myself who pays close attention to those things, I know what it is when I see it. I know, oh, their camera was just a little bit off or they messed up a little bit in editing. But most people are not professional photographers. Instead, they'll just see the outfit or the photo and say, I don't like it. I don't know why, but I just don't like it. There's something unsettling about it. So I will not be buying that outfit. I will not be following that designer. I do not want to ever work with that photographer. And I definitely don't want to put my designs in that fashion show. I know it might sound a little bit dramatic, but the entire point of a fashion show, of Fashion Week, is to show off the clothes. And if your photos make them look bad, it's a bad look for every single person involved, which is normally dozens upon dozens of people who are all collaborating on every single outfit. The most common mistakes I see are having the final images be slightly purple, which means the tint is a little bit off, or a little bit yellow because the whole image is a little bit too warm. As a photographer, you should understand how detrimental this could be to the creative vision of the designer. It's just like that very, very special moment when you see your client post one of your beautiful photos on Instagram with a god-awful filter just slapped on top of it, and it makes your work look like complete garbage. And then people say, oh yeah, that's your work. You're the one that made that photo that looks completely orange and yellow. And you're like, no, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. Somebody else did that. But nobody's the wiser because it has your name on it and you took it. Same thing applies here. Don't make the designer's work look like trash just because you didn't white balance properly. So I think I've made it very clear why you need to nail the white balance. But here's how you do that. First off, like I mentioned, never, ever shoot on auto white balance for a fashion show. You might say, why? My auto white balance is killer. It nails it every single time in my shoots. While that may be the case when you're out shooting on the street for a regular shoot, but you're not normally shooting 40 different models who have different skin tones, different hair colors, completely different outfits on. So what happens when a model walks down the runway in a bright green dress? Your camera is going to see that and say, oh wow, this photo is really green. I need to add some purple into it to balance it out. The camera will adjust and make the overall image just slightly purple, which may make the color green a little bit off. Then the next model walks down the runway and they have a yellow pantsuit on. So the camera says, oh, this whole frame is pretty warm. Let me add some blues back into this white balance, shifting the whole image to a cooler tone. Each shot is going to look completely different because the white balance is constantly changing based on what is in the frame. And even if it is balancing correctly for the clothing, the background and the sides of your image are going to be slightly different for every single shot. This can make the images seem uneven and not consistent, which is not ideal for a fashion show. It's supposed to be a collection, not just a hodgepodge of different photos. And even if all the clothes were pure black or pure white or just one solid color, each model has a completely different skin tone. If you have a model that is pale as snow walking down the runway, and the next model has an orange spray tan, and then the one after that has a very dark skin tone, your white balance is going to be jumping all over the place just trying to match the color to what's in the frame, which is different colored hair, different colored accessories, different colored skin tones. You could even have the same exact model standing in the same spot with the same lighting, but your white balance is going to make pictures inconsistent if it's in auto, because you'll have a full bodied shot with a model wearing a blue dress, and then you zoom in to get a detail shot of her hair, but her hair is bright red. That's going to again completely change the color of the overall photo. The auto white balance is going to be a headache in post as well, because you have to individually edit every single photo, trying to get them all to look the same. And in an industry where the turnaround speed is everything, you can't be spending extra seconds on every single photo trying to get them all to look consistent. What you need to do is set your white balance before the show. You can do this during the rehearsals, nailing your color temperature when the models are walking down the runway practicing. Or you can ask the question into the void that is the photographer's pit, and you're sure enough to get a few answers. Just ask the videographer or the photographer next to you what their white balance is set to, and you'll normally get an answer of 3,500 or 5,500. 4,000, some number like that, which is the color temperature in Kelvin. You can then set that on your camera and then you're good to go. You could even have somebody stand on the runway and shoot just a white piece of paper or a gray card, or even just use your best guess manually by looking at the photos and then input the color temperature. And I say that you can guess because even if you're wrong and you're off by just a little bit, you don't match the runway lighting exactly, it is so much easier in post to just auto white balance one image, get that correct, and then slap that color temperature on the entire gallery to ensure that they are all perfectly white balanced. That way the whites are white and every image is consistent no matter what color outfit is in the frame. I double check in post for every show because even if the house video guy has matched up the lighting exactly and it's supposed to be 5,500, there's a chance that there's a little bit of sunlight that shines on the runway right before the show's about to start, so the temperature will be just a little bit off. And for me, personally, this is one of the things that helps me stand out, is nailing that true temperature to ensure that all the other colors are going to look exactly as they do in real life, just as the designer wanted them. When I shoot a show next to Getty or Vogue, sometimes I'll compare my pictures to theirs after when they're uploaded online, and it always brings me just a little bit of joy knowing that I nailed the white balance just a bit better than some of those admired professionals. So there you go, no auto white balance, manually set it. Look up a tutorial on YouTube if you don't know how, or ask the photographer next to you. Somebody will help you out. The second mistake I see photographers make when photographing a runway is very similar to the first one, which is shooting with auto ISO. I will save you all from having to listen to another massive rant by just taking everything I just told you and swapping out the word color for exposure. If you have your camera set to auto ISO, what do you think is going to change with every new model that walks down the runway? How dark or how bright the images are. Imagine one model walks down with super bright reflective pants. Your camera is going to drop the ISO, making the image darker as to not overexpose the fabric, but it might underexpose the model's face, the model's shirt, and the rest of the scene. And then next comes a dark-skinned model wearing all black. The ISO is going to bump up real high and it's going to look completely different than the photo you just took. That is not how it's looking in real life. Just like with the color, the designer picked the material of the fabric for a reason. If they wanted it to shine bright and be reflective, that's what should be shown in the photos. If they chose a fabric that absorbs light, that's how it should be shown in the photos. It shouldn't automatically erase the shadows to make it look lighter than it is. Don't do the designer dirty. You're there to capture their images, not create something new. And if you use auto ISO, when you go to edit these photos, they're going to have completely different exposures throughout the entire collection. You again don't want to be spending time manually adjusting each image. You don't want your camera thinking that the image is super dark and crank the ISO up to 10,000 and give you some grainy runway photos. And then the very next one, dropping it down to 100 when the model gets close to you, giving you that crazy difference in your final photos. The third mistake that runway photographers make during fashion shows is the one that shakes me to the core. This one will actually get you yelled at in the pit. And I'm not one of those grumpy old men photographers who's going to act like a little child and be catty, but this is the one exception where I may actually snap at you. Just because you're not only going to ruin your own photos by doing this, this, but you'll ruin everybody else's photo around you. You might ruin the audience's experience, and you may even ruin the show for the models. And the mistake is using a flash. Never ever, ever, ever use a flash on the runway. Any fashion show that actually cares about the quality of their show will have the runway properly lit. There will be no need for flash. Now I know not every single runway show is produced by somebody that is experienced or maybe has the budget for proper lighting, or sometimes they have a creative vision to do something different, which is fine. You know, I'm just biased because I'm a photographer. I want the best photo, but I understand that not every show is a photographer's dream. That being said, if you use flash on a runway, you're going to mess up every other photographer's photo. Why? Because we did not all properly expose our settings to account for your flash. I have my settings properly exposed for what I see. If your flash goes off at the same time I'm taking a picture, it's going to be completely overexposed. It's going to ruin my photo. And you might think it's fine because the flash is one teeny tiny fraction of a second. The chances of it going off right when I'm taking my photo are very slim. Well, look at this photo. That's exactly what happened there. Those photos are completely ruined because somebody was using a flash. And if every photographer in the pit was using a flash, it would be insane. It would be so hard to get a clean picture because you would have 30 different flashes going off at the same exact second. So that is the main reason not to use a flash, because you're gonna ruin everybody else's photo, but that's not the only reason not to use a flash. Another reason is because it makes no sense. Think about how long a runway is. Look at this one here. It's well over 100 feet long. And if your camera flash is not going to make it down all the way at the other end of the runway, when you're getting those first full body shots, it's going to have no effect. It's only going to affect your shot when the model is close up and in your face. You're going to have completely different exposures from the beginning to the end. And if you're using manual settings, which as you now know you should be, it's not even going to work because the model is going to be overexposed when they get up close to you and underexposed when they're down on the end of the runway. The flash can also be blinding and distracting to the models. Yes, they're already basically blind because they're staring into massive spotlights going right into their eyes, but the paparazzi effect of having multiple flashes going off right when they're supposed to be seeing their mark out of their corner of the eye could be very distracting and could make them miss their mark. Lastly, you're the photographer, not the show. The guests will be looking in your direction as the model is making their turn or posing for the cameras. They're trying to look at the outfit, not be blinded by a sea of flashes. I think I made it clear that there's no reason to use a flash during a runway show. Small exception, maybe the show's done at night, outdoors, with no lights. I've seen it done before with some beginner shows, and people are bringing their massive strobes and setting those up in the photography pit. Obviously, that's an exception, and good luck to you with that one. Reason number 4 your runway photos aren't looking great is because they are blurry. This is a super simple fix, and all you have to do is crank up that shutter speed. I personally shoot almost all my fashion shows at 1/400th of a second. That has always been quick enough to capture the movement of the hands, of hair flipping, of fabric or dresses swinging or being tossed around. If you're shooting any slower than 1/200th of a second, there's a chance that the model's hands will be blurry as they're swinging, walking down the runway, or their hair, or definitely the fabric if they're turning or spinning or showing the movement of the outfit. There's really just no excuse to have blurry photos. All you need to do is have your shutter speed fast enough and you can avoid that problem altogether. Something else that may help is using a tripod or a monopod. If you're naturally a shaky person or you're out there holding up a big, long, heavy lens, there's a tendency that you might shake or wobble a little bit. So just use a monopod and that can help sturdy your shot, ensuring there's no blur whatsoever. Just get your shutter speed right and get those crispy shots. The 5th mistake is another heartbreaker, and it's when I see photographers post runway photos that aren't straight. It is so simple, yet I see so many people sharing crooked photos. It's tragic really, because just like an off-colored photo, a crooked photo just gives bad vibes. It's purposely used in cinema to create an uneasy feeling. It's called a Dutch tilt. You'll see it when things are scary or unsettling. It's the choice a director makes to purposely make the viewer feel uneasy, and I can almost guarantee the designers do not want you feeling easy when you're looking at their collection. So a few ways to ensure that the photos are nice and straight would be to, number 1, shoot them straight in camera. You can do this by again using a tripod or monopod to make sure you're not flopping all over the place during the show. There will be levels on the actual monopod or tripod that will show you if it's standing up straight. And then even digitally on your camera screen, it'll show you how straight your shot is. But I personally mainly use my horizon lines on the runway, whether that's the backdrop, the sides of the background, the top of the backdrop, or where the floor meets the background. There's going to be some straight lines somewhere in your shot. Just ensure that those vertical lines are completely straight up and down, and then those horizontal lines are running perpendicular to those. I also have a grid set up in my camera, and I just ensure that those grid lines are matching what I see in the viewfinder. There's really no excuse for crooked shots because you can even fix that in post if you so happen to be off balance for a shot, or maybe you accidentally shot the whole show just a little bit tilted. You can very simply correct the angle of your shots in Lightroom and then apply that same correction to your entire collection, or just any specific shots that need it. Use the grid lines on the computer screen, use the natural lines within the shot, just keep everything nice and straight. The focus needs to be on the clothing, not wondering why the viewer feels a little bit nauseous looking at your photo. The sixth mistake you might be making when photographing a fashion show is the framing. It's in the same vein of keeping your photo straight, but this is focusing on the overall composition of the photo itself. Now again, I'll keep repeating this, but the focus of your photo needs to be on the, say it with me now, the outfit. Yay, exactly. I see so many photographers sharing photos with massive amounts of space above or below the model. There's only one thing that needs to be in the photo, and that's the model and their outfit. It is a huge distraction if half the photo is of the floor or the ceiling or the crowd. Of course, this isn't applicable to those artsy creative shots where you're doing something different, but I'm talking about the main runway shots. These shows are out here sharing photos where the photographer has a third of the picture that's just floor, and I'm just baffled as to why. There should be a minimal amount of space between the feet and a minimal amount of space above the head. Ideally, you have a telephoto zoom lens so you're able to do all this cropping in camera, but not everyone has a lens like that, and that's fine. I shot my first runway show on an 85mm prime lens, and I was pretty far away from the runway. So what I had to do was crop in every single photo after the show, and that's what you need to be doing if you don't get your cropping right in camera. I know it takes a lot more time and a lot more work to crop every single photo in post, but it's what you have to do if you want your photos to look professional. Do you want your images to be looking like this or like this? Do you want it to look like an amateur shot it on an iPhone, or it was done by a professional? There's no excuse to have improper framing for your photo. Don't make everybody unhappy where the model's using a magnifying glass saying, "Where am I in this photo? What am I even wearing?" Because half of the photo is of the crowd or the ceiling. That's no good for everybody. It even makes the show look bad because it's like, what is this setup that they're using? It's a giant empty warehouse, rather than, oh look, wow, it's professional. It's just a runway that's very cropped in and all you see is the model. You know why you're there. It's to capture the look, not the room. Now, if you ever found yourself missing the perfect shot where the model's eyes are closed or their foot isn't perfectly on the ground with the other foot balanced like this on the toe, then here's a sneaky little tactic that can make your life a whole lot easier. The seventh mistake you're making is not shooting in the right drive mode. You need to be shooting in burst mode. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about the machine gun photographer. You know the photographers that are next to you in the pit, and when they see the model come from the backstage, they just hold down the shutter button for the entire walk, taking 500 photos in the span of 10 seconds. And it sounds like a machine gun. Brrr. Don't do that. That's not helpful for you. It's going to make your editing and selection process way harder than it needs to be because you're going to have an insane amount of photos that you have to go through. Instead, I'm talking about using that feature sparingly. So instead of getting just one photo every time you press the shutter, now you'll be getting 3 or 4 different choices of each moment, which drastically increases your chance of ensuring that the model's eyes are open. I mean, a blink is pretty quick, so if you're shooting 3, 4, or 5 photos within that moment, there's a better chance that you'll get the photo that you want, instead of the model's foot being barely off the ground, or having the heel strike first, or having the toe like that. You'll have all 4 of those different images, and then you can select the one that you want with the foot completely flat on the ground. Compare that to only shooting one single photo and trying to time it exactly right. can be a little bit tricky, especially since the models will be walking at different paces, they'll have different stride lengths, and again, sometimes they'll be blinking or looking down, looking for their mark, or just doing something that's out of your control. If you're trying to time all those things perfectly and you only have one single chance, there's a good chance that you'll miss it. So shoot in burst mode, have 3 to 4 or 5 different options within that 1 second. It makes your life a whole lot easier. There's no need to try to be a sniper when you can be a machine gunner, but again, a smart machine gunner. You're only going to fire when it makes sense. You're not going to hold down the trigger the moment you see your target miles away. You're going to wait for your shot, and then you burst and you shoot your model with a camera. This 8th mistake I see the majority of the photographers make, and it's somewhat of a personal preference, but I think it can really help your photos to stand out and separate yourself from the crowd by doing this. If you're shooting with a high aperture, I'm talking 8 or above, then the background is going to be nearly completely in focus, the same amount as the model. And as I've talked about this whole time, the point of your photo is to make the model stand out. You want to have that separation, that nice blur in the background to really make your model pop. I would say the vast majority of photographers shoot the Runway at f4.0, which is fine, and it still has a little bit of blur in the background, but I personally shoot all my Runway photos at f2.8. I know it may be a little controversial since the thought is shooting at an aperture so wide open, the entirety of the outfit may not be in focus. Maybe the details won't be as sharp, or part of the outfit or the model's features will be just slightly out of focus because the depth of field falls off much quicker with an aperture that is so wide open. But instead what I found is it really just increases that blur of the background and gives the photos a more beautiful look. I think the models look better, the clothes look better, the environment is cleaner, the bokeh is bigger, the blur is blurrier, the cream is creamier. I think it really just helps my photos stand out and gives it a slightly more artistic look rather than an event coverage look. And the reason nothing is out of focus for my photos is because everything is on the same exact plane. The models aren't posing where their arms are out leaning forward or they're leaning backward. They're all walking very straight, so everything from head to toe is going to be within, 6 inches of focus. So having an aperture of 2.8 is going to be able to capture that small depth of field. Everything's on the same plane. The only thing that's going to be out of focus are the things in front or behind the model. They're also pretty far away and I'm zoomed in a good amount. So again, it makes the depth of field about the same. If the model was way up in my face and I'm shooting at 1.8, then yeah, the eyes would be in focus and maybe the nose would be out of focus and the back of the outfit might be a little blurry. But that's not the case because they're so far away. I have never ever had an issue with any of the details on my shots lacking that sharpness. And I think it makes them look just a little bit better. It helps to enhance the quality of the images. And with the amount of Runway photographers out there and how stiff the competition can be, doing anything to help yourself stand out in a good way can really accelerate your career and make you well known for having some of the most beautiful shots in town. The last and final tip I have is a bonus. Since no one really teaches you about this secret, it can be hard to know if you're even making a mistake without someone telling you. This is not picking your prime spot on the runway. If you're shooting a model for the entire length of the runway as they walk towards you and you're using all those different pictures throughout, this is going to give a very inconsistent look in your photos. The first and most obvious way to tell if you're using photos from all around the runway is the horizon lines. There's going to be lines of reference in the photos to tell where your model was shot on the runway. If the horizon line is cutting through the model's calves in the first 3 looks, and then in the next photo the horizon line is all the way through the middle of the model's waist, and then the next one it's going through their neck, it's going to give a very inconsistent look. This is a collection, this is one show, it's all supposed to flow together. If you're having that line in the background kind of jump around to different spots, it's going to throw off the overall look of the collection. It's not going to be as pleasant to look at, and it's going to be just a little bit jarring. It's like having a jump cut in a movie where somebody's talking and there's a water bottle in the scene. And it's here, and it cuts away and cuts back, and now the water bottle's over here. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. Just throws your brain off for a second and distracts you. If you look at the photos from Vogue Runway, they tend to look identical. You essentially want every single photo to look exactly the same in every single way except for the model who's in the frame. If you're using the very first 2 steps of the model from look 1 and then the last 2 steps from the next model, it's not only going to be different in terms of the background, but the lighting as well. Even though a professional show will have consistent lighting throughout, or should have consistent lighting throughout, there's a chance that it's not the case. Actually, there's a really good chance that it's not the case. I've shot many industry shows on the official calendar where that's not how the runway is lit. And it's not always necessarily a mistake that they've made. It's usually more so a creative decision where it looks cooler in person or on video to have the lighting change throughout the show. For example, some runways will have an overhead spotlight every few feet, so it'll be very bright and then very dark, and then very bright and then very dark, and then maybe a super bright light behind the photographer's pit to light up the front area of the runway. So when something like that happens, if you're shooting them at different spots throughout the runway, you're going to have differently exposed photos. To combat this, what you need to do is pick your spot during rehearsals. When you're there early enough, which you should be to practice shooting the models doing their practice walk, you can test out all the different spots and find where the models look the best. Once you've found that spot, say it's right next to pole number 3, or it's right as their foot is right next to that crack on the ground, or maybe that scuff mark. Or you can even count in your head and say, once they turn right here, I'm going to be shooting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you're going to have those 4 different steps on the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your 4 different shots. And you're going to be shooting in burst mode. So now you have maybe 12 different photos of that section of those 4 steps. So you're almost guaranteed to have the perfect shot with their eyes looking up towards you, feet on the ground, hands by their side, everything you need. If the model has a full 4 steps where they're completely off, that's more so on them than you, but it really gives you the best chance of knowing that all your photos for the show are going to look exactly the same, because they're going to be in the exact same spot for the background, for the lighting, the horizons. Everything's going to be the same. The models are also going to be in the same stride because they will have gotten into their walk, their flow at that point, and hit their mark by then. If you're shooting a model right as they come around a corner and take their very first step, everything's going to be completely different versus a model who's already taken 5 or 6 steps and gotten into their rhythm. So I typically like to give the models a few steps to get into that rhythm. Just take their full body shot at that same exact spot, and then as they move a bit closer, shoot their mid body shot, which is about thigh up, and then as they get a little closer, I like to do the detail shots of their hair, the makeup, the details on the clothing, if they're holding a bag or special shoes, just something up close and personal. And then I'll zoom all the way back in, ready for the next model who's already walking down the runway, about to hit that magic mark that I have in my head. If you do this for your next show, I guarantee you'll notice a visible difference in the collection, and when you're sharing your photos and comparing it to other photographers, it's really going to make yours stand out and seem a lot more professional. Those are the 8 mistakes that you are no longer going to be making when shooting your next fashion show. If you apply all of these specific techniques, it's really going to elevate your work to a whole nother level and help you stand out from the crowd of amateur photographers who are all making these mistakes. Continually applying these practices in your shows is going to enable you to grow the portfolio that is worthy of landing these high-paying professional shows all around the world. If you found any value in this video whatsoever, it would really mean a lot to me if you could just 1, click like to let me know that you liked it, and 2, subscribe to my channel because I will be releasing a lot more videos just like this, giving away all my knowledge that I've learned in my decade plus of being a photographer. I know that something as niche as runway photography or even fashion photography, there's a million different little rabbit holes that I could go down and expand on. I really like to go in depth on these topics because when I was first starting out, all I had was Google, and the answers to my questions would just be an article that's like 10 years old with some crappy out-of-date photos and some basic advice that wasn't really any help. So I like to dive deep into my brain and extract out every little detail of information so that you can take these nuggets and then apply them into your own practice. It's hard to know what you don't know if you don't know what you don't know, you know? More videos to come covering literally everything I've ever learned, and if there's something more specific that you have questions about or that you want me to expand on for a new topic, for a new video, just let me know down in the comments. It would be super helpful so I can ensure that I'm covering everything that you want to hear or you need to know. I really appreciate your support, and I'm excited to grow this community here as we build an army of the best fashion photographers this generation has ever seen. Talk to you soon.